Donald Trump just addressed the Davos World Economic Forum, and he changed his tune on a few things, and I wanted to give you a heads up on these, not only from the point of view of taxation, but also Russia, Ukraine, and most importantly, crypto, for a lot of folks standing by for that crypto announcement today. And this is because Senator Loomis suggested, hey, stay tuned for a crypto announcement. Well, Donald Trump did drop the word crypto and becoming a great crypto nation. He didn't mention anything regarding what the crypto nation is looking for, which is that establishment of a strategic cryptocurrency reserve. Maybe that's going to come in partnership with El Salvador, some folks are hoping for. Donald Trump has said that the strategic Bitcoin reserve the United States has would simply consist of cryptocurrencies in total, that includes Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, that are seized from criminals and then held. However, some are hoping that the United States could go on as far as purchasing up to $100 billion of Bitcoin over the next 4 to 5 years to contribute to the Bitcoin currency reserve. Now, we didn't hear anything about this today, at least not yet, but we did hear some other changes. The big one to me was the change in tune that I just heard from Donald Trump on Russia and Ukraine. And this one I have to say is a little bit of a letdown. Donald Trump suggested that we need the cost of oil to come down. Now you might think, wait, what does this have to do with Russia, Ukraine? That's what I thought too, but it's coming. So Donald Trump starts by lambasting Saudi Arabia, suggesting, hey, y'all are trying to, be cool and invest $600 billion into America over the next years. I'm going to ask you to round that up to $1 trillion. And at first I'm starting to, kind of scratch my head going, are we just like pulling numbers out of nowhere at this point? Because I kind of alluded to this silliness of these numbers because I want to see these things turn into reality on Twitter, on X, with my post here. Take a look at this. I posted this yesterday. The world has turned into a pissing contest of who can invest more money into the United States of America for Donald Trump. First, it's $100 billion by SoftBank. Then it's $500 billion over 5 years. Then Saudi Arabia is like, oh yeah, well, we got $600 billion. Who's next? I wrote yesterday. And in fairness, I also wrote, hell, I'm here for it. This is great for America, right? Like, this is great for the American worker and the American economy. Like, I'm all for it. This is a good thing. But there's also some lunacy, that was the word I was looking for earlier, in some of where these numbers are coming from, because I'm like, wait a minute, are we just like pulling these out of thin air? Are these actually going to turn into reality? So this irony is me going, who's next? Well, who's next is Donald Trump going back to the $600 billion figure going, hey, can you get this up to $1 trillion? I mean, it's literally like negotiate. Hey, I got these guys at 600 now. You're at 5. Can we get you? This feels like a real estate deal, Hey, again, all here for it. But wait a minute. So what does this have to do with Russia, Ukraine, and oil? Well, so as he's begging the Saudis for more money, he also says, hey, I'm a little disappointed you didn't do more to get oil prices down before I became president. And then I'm like, oh, okay, so their job was to get oil prices down before you became president. Apparently, yes. So Donald Trump expressed his frustration that oil prices were not lower before he became president. And now, even though he wants more oil production, oil prices are down about 1% after his commentary. We're still at $78 on Brent. What you actually have is Donald Trump now saying that, hey, we need oil prices to come down, because if oil prices came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Okay, that's a really big change in tune, because he's always said that he would end the war within 24 hours of taking office. Now, obviously, a lot of us thought this was just sort of hyperbolic, that, all right, even if he ends the war within a month, it's going to be a good thing. And obviously, we're only 4 days in now, so maybe it's not that big of a deal, right? Okay, fine. But wait a second. Now, all of a sudden, the war in Ukraine between Russia and, Ukraine is not going to end until oil prices come down. So that's a little bit problematic, because a lot of people see this and say, hey, is this a U-turn on what you promised us? Or is this potentially a realization that negotiating with Putin isn't going to be as easy as previously thought? Now, when he was asked about this, he ended up responding with, well, the war would have never happened had I been president. But sir, you were not the president when the war began. So while that is possible, it's not the reality we face today. And so now the question that people have is, okay, like, are you just going to throw in the towel on Russia, Ukraine because oil prices are high and you're blaming the Saudis for that? So there's some frustration that I see people think are going to come from this. Now, he does go into talking about how because he's declared a national energy emergency, he's going to be able to bypass a lot of energy environmental reviews that'll make it a lot easier to build infrastructure projects faster. Okay, great. But wait a minute, we have two problems with that. Problem number one is you're going to face a lot of lawsuits, which he's no foe to lawsuits or unfamiliar with lawsuits, but those lawsuits and judges could potentially put a kibosh on how quickly some of these emergency orders could be used to bypass environmental regulation. Because remember, government is all about balancing the needs of multiple different people or interests, and yes, environmentalists do have a say as well because they are also taxpayers. Now, I'm not taking sides here, I'm just saying there are going to be problems on one hand with that for bringing oil prices down, and number two, the Wall Street Journal isn't actually that optimistic. Take a look at this. The Wall Street Journal wrote, oil and gas companies to stay put for now. This was a couple days ago they wrote this, but it's relevant now. Trump wants oil and gas producers to drill, baby, drill, but they have adopted a cautious approach to how they spend money. Frackers are more focused on returning cash to shareholders via buybacks and dividends rather than reinvesting it in the oil patch. Shale operators known for drill for oil are also drill for oil overwhelmingly on private land, and opening up more federal land or for deployment is unlikely to unleash a drilling frenzy. Meanwhile, pipeline firms, which have run into strident opposition from environmental groups in recent years, still have to navigate a complex regulatory environment to make sure long-term economics makes sense before they greenlight multi-billion-dollar projects. In other words, like, even if you clean up regulation, you still have to, as a company, decide, does it make sense to spend multi-billions of dollars on new energy infrastructure when Brent's at $78? Well, a lot of people say only when oil is above $100. In other words, oil companies are really only incentivized to drill, baby, drill when oil is above $100 because the ROI on these multi-billion-dollar projects is huge. If oil plummets because a bunch of companies are like, yeah, we're going to do new oil projects or whatever, and the price of oil plummets to $50, they actually might cancel those projects because their ROI could be negative. So, like, more oil projects, it's sort of like damned if you do, damned if you don't, right? If you don't build, oil prices stay high. But if you do build, oil prices plummet, and you want to, like, you don't want to build more because then you're just adding to the supply problem and you're reducing your ROI. But if oil prices are high, you wish you had the infrastructure so you could capture it. So little bit of a struggle there. Every company is going to have to analyze the regulatory risk and the cost profile for what they want to do. Exactly. So this is just those are two problems here. But the reason I bring those up again now is because those two problems say, all right, does that mean the war in Ukraine is just not going to end because oil prices now are going to stay high? Again, a lot of people are going to go, you said 24 hours. Again, let's give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's call it 24 days. Let's call it 24 weeks, for goodness sake. But what I just heard from him was not very optimistic. I would have expected a lot more optimism that, yes, it wasn't within 24 hours. Okay, hyperbolic, get it. But now it sounds like we're throwing in the towel on Russia, Ukraine until oil prices come down. I'm very disappointed in that. Anyway, then Donald Trump says that interest rates need to come down now around the world. He's going to push for that to happen. He reiterates how he's trying to fix the border and all else. He came up with a new demand as well for NATO. He said he wants all countries in NATO to now contribute 5% of their GDP towards NATO funding, up from 2%. This kind of, in some part, relates to the Russia-Ukraine situation again, because the Russia-Ukraine situation is going to be expensive for longer, sort of like higher for longer, costs are higher for longer. And so now it's like, everybody needs to contribute more because we're going to be at war with Russia, Ukraine for longer. It sort of feels like a tacit admission that this war is going to go on longer. Now, he does say we'll have rapid energy approvals. Again, though, that's sort of limited by the other issues that we just talked about. Talks about building new electrical plants near infrastructure, including clean coal, bringing corporate tax rates down to 15% if you make your product in the United States for corporations and small businesses. I like hearing that. In fact, in our Trumponomics course, we talk specifically about how to strategize around tax benefits, the corporate tax rate, and a lot more. There's so much information in the Trumponomics course on this. But anyway, he talks about the 1-year deduction. I'm also curious why he calls it a 1-year deduction. It's the 179 accelerated depreciation schedule. But that's okay. That's maybe the simpler phrase to use for a public audience or whatever. The 1-year deduction, he says he wants to bring back and maybe even, bring back more of. He's basically talking about more rapid tax deductions for buying capital assets, planes, machinery, investments for your business, whatever. But then he's also asterisking this by saying, well, we'll have to work with Democrats to approve it. Well, that's mostly because if you want to get a big bill done, you got to have 60 votes, unless you could use budget reconciliation to get your big tax plan done. Budget reconciliation might be able to squeeze by without that filibuster-proof 60 votes. So that's why he says we'll have to work on with Dems to approve it. It's also why he's cozying up to people like John Fetterman, who's already voted with Trump on some of the approvals for his cabinet. He says we'll do a deduction for businesses and small businesses. We'll bring corporate taxes down to 15%. Great. We'll make demands of other countries like Canada. We'll tariff you if you don't, balance out more with our trade policies. We don't need your cars, lumber, or gas, he says. We have enough in America. All right. Few things here. First, he says we're going to tariff you to balance this out, or you could always become a state. Okay, so he's sort of reiterating the idea of just become a state within America. This is sort of the American imperialism, which is interesting, fine. But I want to just add some clarity on how deficits work. Deficits matter because they mean money is flowing out of the country. So when you have a trade deficit with another country, it means more money is going to the other country. So if we have a trade deficit with China, more money is going to China. That means we have to borrow more, which weakens our currency. It also makes us less competitive. And it also means we're less competitive because obviously money is going to that country instead of us, which then potentially moves jobs out of the country and, again, weakens our currency. It's just sort of a vicious cycle. This is why Donald Trump, who likes a strong United States, wants build in America, because then you have the reverse. Jobs come here, a trade surplus comes here, demand comes here, stronger dollar, easier to borrow if necessary, more economic stability, blah, 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 blah. He talks about how China is catching up on nuclear and Putin is a fan of reducing nuclear and how he wants to reduce nuclear. This has been talked about for decades. It's called nuclear non-proliferation, right? The non-expansion of your nuclear arsenals. This is frankly, just old news. But he reiterates this here, and I don't think it's a bad thing to reiterate. In the meantime, though, China keeps building nukes because they want to catch up with the arsenal that the United States and Russia have. I think last count is China has hundreds of nukes, and the United States and Russia have 5,000 to 6,000. So China's got some catching up to do, which they are catching up on. So anyway, with all of that said, it's worth considering some of these changes here and evaluating what do these mean. Well, that's a funny one. I'm going to have to fix that. What it really means is you're in a situation where you're starting at the 4th day now of the Trump administration to see a little bit of a rollback on the side of Russia, Ukraine, also on oil. You're seeing a little bit of a rollback here. And then on taxes, he's already starting to point at the Democrats, going, hey, well, we're going to need the Democrats. So we're starting to get some asterisks on some pretty important things that people are looking for Trump to do. And then on the other side, we were expecting this. We're getting that reiteration of we want rates down, we want rates down, we want rates down. Okay, fine. But if the economy keeps booming, rates probably won't come down rapidly. Now, rates will come down really fast if we go into a recession, but that would take an unemployment recession. That's really a topic for a different video. If you want more insight on that and what Piper Sandler thinks regarding bonds and jobs and recession, make sure to watch the video that I posted this morning. I think it's a pretty important video. Just type into YouTube. I'll tell you what the title is really quickly. Anyway, just subscribe to the channel and then you'll get all of the videos. YouTube may not show all of them to you, though, so make sure you're subscribed and hit that notification bell. Global recession unlocked and MicroStrategy, quote-unquote, Ponzi. check that one out and you'll see a little bit more detail on that. All right, folks, thanks so much for watching. We'll see you in the next one. Goodbye and good luck.
Why not advertise these things that you told us here? I feel like nobody else knows about this.
We'll try a little advertising and see how it goes.
Congratulations, man. You have done so much. People love you. People look up to you.
Kevin Paffrath there, financial analyst and YouTuber. Meet Kevin. Always great to get your take.